When you retire, you may get a chance to go to football heaven. This is football heaven.
Hey guys, welcome to The Mission. I'm your host, Jameer Howerton, and as always, we have a great show for you. Early spring, the Hall announced the Award of Excellence to members of 4 groups that are vital to every NFL football operation and their organization. I'm talking about the assistant coaches, trainers, equipment managers, and public relations personnel. Throughout the month of June, we'll get a chance to celebrate the excellence of these groups, the people that are behind the scenes that make the engine go. We'll speak to a member of each selection committee to learn how this inaugural 2022 class of Award of Excellence honorees were selected. And joining us today to help kick off the series is retired Vice President of Public Relations for the Detroit Lions, Mr. Bill Keenist is joining us right here on The Mission. Bill, welcome to The Mission. Hope all is well with you. I am so honored to have you here today, sir, to help us kick off this 4-part series of honoring, how can I say it? Honoring the great men behind the scenes where a lot of these people, such as myself, being a former equipment manager, you live, you thrive. Sir, I remember in the business, NFL players would say the NFL stands for not for long. We would say no family life, because we were 3 hours in before anybody got there, and we were 3 to 4 hours after the fact. So with that being said, sir, we're here to honor the wordsmiths. We're here to honor the men who were in charge of the storytelling of their organizations as well as the NFL. So first and foremost, Bill, when you look at this award, what does it mean to you?
Well, it's hard to really quantify what it means to me, and I would believe my colleagues would have the same opinion, because we work behind the scenes as the equipment guys, as the trainers. I think that 3 entities there had a unique bond. And you mentioned earlier about the hours. I would joke over the years, everybody jokes about dog years. Well, how about PR years and equipment years and trainer years? I mean, it's, but the reason why we do it is because we love the game. We love being part of a team. And for my colleagues to be honored in the most ultimate manner at the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I'm getting chills right this instant saying it. I mean, it's the epitome.
Yes.
That being said, they would share it with their staff, with their organization, because the one thing, and I know you had it as an equipment guy, and the trainers have it, and to me, the most important component to being successful as a PR practitioner is to have a servant mentality, because we serve. That's our job. And if you do it to the degree that these individuals have, thank God that there's an honor that can be shared. And as I said earlier, the Hall of Fame is the pinnacle of that.
And how impressed, excited, and just overall your feelings of the Hall of Fame taking this approach to honor these men, because I know there's the Pete Rozelle Award, and I know the NFL gives out awards to the teams, the PR teams, if you will, but for the Hall to take this step. What are your thoughts?
I'll tell you what I envision, Jameer, is 30 years from now, 40 years from now, grandchildren of some of these honorees, great-grandchildren, are going to have a reason to go to Canton, and they're going to see that name on the wall, and they're going to get chills like we have right now. And I think there's so many reasons why this is wonderful, what the Hall is doing. But we just celebrated our 100th anniversary as a league. And there are so many people that took part in making the league what it is today. And as you know, there are the unsung heroes, if you will, and those that served, and to have the PR staffs and the trainers and the equipment guys and the assistant coaches be honored in the manner which the Hall is doing. I don't think we can express our thanks in words. It's hard to do that. So the appreciation is profound.
All right, well, let's dive into it, Mr. Keenist.
Yeah.
I know you had a tough task, but when you're looking at this award, what was the criteria? What were you looking for in selecting the inaugural class? Because this is the first of the first, and this is kind of like the blueprint that sets that standard as you're building other classes. But what was the criteria you were looking for?
Well, it was an impossible task in some respects, because we selected 5, but there's probably 2 or 3 times as many that are just as deserving. That's what makes this so special. And it's not unlike what the Hall of Fame selection committee goes through every year. You look at all the players that are so deserving, and then you look at the first ballot Hall of Famers. There's something unique. There's something distinct about that. And when you look at this class, again, I'm going to be getting chills through this whole thing. That's the connection we have with each other. That's the brotherhood. And that's the reality of this. Each of these individuals served their organizations or their league for 30, 40, Joe Browne, 50 years. Imagine everyone that he touched, and Gary Wright and Charlie Dayton and Joe Gordon and Jim Saccomano. I mean, imagine who they touched through those years. The changes within their organizations, the changes in the league. I've said this for years, Jameer, that no part of our business, and I'm biased, obviously, but no part of our business has changed more dramatically since I got in the business than the communications part, the PR part, the media part. I mean, think about it.
Yes.
Go back to the 70s when you had, major daily newspapers, couple radio stations, TV stations. All of these individuals were around before there was ESPN and the internet and texting and Twitter. But to their credit, they navigated that. They did it with class, integrity. They served their organization through those changes as the league popularity exploded. I mean, some of these individuals started when baseball was the national pastime and was the most popular, but that ended in the 60s, 70s. And to navigate all the changes in our business, I think is as much a testament to their talent, their character, their integrity, as anything, because just like I said, take a minute and think back to how much this side of the business has changed. It's been dramatic. It's like no other part, in my opinion, when you look at everything. Go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, when all of these individuals were starting their career, and where it is when they finished it. It's a mountain of change.
Yes. And you know what, to add to that, Mr. Keenist, one of the things that, Frank Ramos was as a young kid working for the Jets. He was our vice president of public relations. Just a little small blip, social media. How much has that changed the landscape? Because now you have the players are like this. They're almost like controlling their narrative. And that changes the whole dynamic.
It really does. And this is why I say there's nothing like the PR role. And truthfully, I think it's gotten harder. And I commend the current, cast of colleagues, of PR colleagues in the league. So just the 24/7, 365 reality of it. I heard a story in recent weeks, the tragedy of Dwayne Haskins being killed, hit by a vehicle. The Steelers PR director was in Augusta, I believe, at the Masters, and he's there probably with family. Bert Lawton enjoying some time off, which isn't really time off. It never is. And he had to deal with that. And we've all been through those things. And it just makes you appreciate these five individuals even more, because they've navigated all those issues. I mean, when you stop and think about, and I use this term sincerely, how many individuals these five were responsible for, however you quantify that, over their career, thousands. And I think of the impact they've had on the lives of coaches, players, organization, media. One of my greatest honors in my career was seeing Steve Largent, a Hall of Famer whose bust is in Canton, select Gary Wright to present him to the Hall of Fame, the first PR director ever so honored. That to me, again, chills, right, is incredible, but it speaks to the person that Gary was and is, the professional, the impact Gary, like so many of our colleagues, have had on players. Because, like the equipment guys, like the trainers, your father confessor, your Mother Teresa to some of these guys, because they're coming to you with things. That's and right. You have to maintain that integrity where you're always doing what's best for the individual and the team and the organization, serving the media properly. So it's a fine line sometimes.
Bill, why don't you do the honors for us and call out this year's honorees in the public relations and give us a backstory on your colleagues and what they meant to you.
Okay, that will be easy to do and an honor to do that. So first and foremost, Joe Browne, who's been with the league for over 50 years. No one served as long as Joe did in the NFL. And I do have a personal story to tell you about Joe. And it was, I had started in the league with Washington in the early 80s, went back home to Pittsburgh for the USFL, and then came back to the league with the Lions. I was fortunate to come back. And it was my first PR meeting back in the NFL after leaving and coming back, 1986 in Dallas, I believe. And it was the first or second day of the meetings, and I'm an assistant PR director with the Lions at the time. And I get in the elevator at the hotel, and Joe's there. And I'm convinced he doesn't know me from the person at the concierge at the hotel, right? And I get in, everybody knows Joe, and I extend my hand to introduce myself, and I go, Mr. Browne, Bill, he goes, I know who you are. He goes, I want to tell you, you did a great job in Pittsburgh. I've heard a lot of good things. And I don't know that I've ever been impacted by those few words as I was by Joe Browne. And he took the time to recognize a young PR guy who had left the league and come back. And that meant the world to me. That told me I belong. And I never forgot that. And I've reminded Joe of that over the years. Just the impact those words had. And it's not unlike all the interactions these colleagues have had with others. And then to see Joe navigate from the highest level of PR at the league, everything that's happened. I mean, it's remarkable. 50 years. Who spends 50 years anywhere, let alone in the NFL, the ultimate, sport in our culture? And again, to navigate the reality of all the changes the league has seen, and to go through so many pivotal, landmark experiences, the Super Bowl in Tampa during Desert Storm, and all the changes in security, 9/11, and for the league to have Joe as a voice of reason, as someone to offer perspective and guidance. We know the role, we as PR practitioners know the role he played. And for Joe to be honored, he's on the Mount Rushmore, no doubt.
And our next,
the next, I'll mention Joe Gordon. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Joe Gordon was as big in the PR world as anybody I've ever met. I mean, he was almost untouchable. And I remember my first meeting with Joe. I was in college. I was actually doing a magazine story. I went to Ohio U, and I was there for one weekend. And Joe and his staff took such great care of me. And then a few years later, I end up back in Pittsburgh for the USFL. And the USFL was an enemy to the NFL, as we recall, those of us from the early 80s. But Joe treated me with such respect, such professionalism. And I wasn't expecting it. I really wasn't. And he helped me, and he set a standard that in our city that'll never, and I say Pittsburgh, what I meant by that, that'll never be matched. Now, I will say this, it did get a little old hearing from the media, well, Joe did it this way, why don't you do it the way Joe did it? Most of the time I did, or I tried to, but and the thing about Joe, no PR person ever worked with more Hall of Famers. That's not an accident. That's not a coincidence. There's a reason for that. And to go through 4 Super Bowls and deal with the national media as he did, the Steelers history, and I lived it growing up there, people point to the hiring of Chuck Noll, absolutely. The drafting of Terry Bradshaw, absolutely. The drafting of Joe Green, absolutely. Those 3. Well, at the same time, the Steelers hired Joe Gordon, in that same, 2 or 3 year period. And he helped navigate the team through all the changes in the communication world, dealing with the national media. And he is absolutely deserving. I don't think, we can appreciate what he went through, taking that franchise from where it was, where they hadn't even won a division title, to the, the pinnacle of pro football. Charlie Dayton.
Yeah.
I have such a fondness for Charlie Dayton. Charlie Dayton was a mentor to me, because when I was with Washington, I got to know Charlie. I got to know Charlie and Kevin Byrne on the basketball court at a PR meeting in Clearwater, Florida, when I was with Washington. That's how we got to know each other during the day. And Charlie and Kevin were exceptional athletes. And that's how I got to know them. And, and I mentioned Kevin. Kevin is as deserving as anyone to be in this crew. It's so hard. It's so hard. But Charlie, we met, and Washington played Atlanta a few times. I advanced a preseason game, and he became a true mentor for me. And the one thing I'll say about Charlie, and I don't want to embarrass anyone here, but he went through something in Atlanta when he was the PR director.
Okay.
And he lost his job because he was blamed for something getting out. And he had nothing to do with it. And the impact that had on me, and I'm sure so many other practitioners, PR people at that time, was, here's a guy who's probably as good as there is in the business. He had that reputation. He was one of the top 10, top 5 in the league. Everybody knew Charlie. Everybody respected Charlie. His work spoke for itself. But because of a situation that happened down there with the hiring of a new coach, and, a candidate being, given to somebody in the media, the assumption was it was Charlie, because, it's got to be the PR staff, right? It wasn't. But he lost his job. And I'm thinking, and this speaks to the reality of what these 5 individuals have gone through and what every PR person goes through. If the best in the league can lose his job for something he didn't do, what does that tell you? And what it told me was, always be secure in your ability to do the job, not the job itself. And that was a life lesson that I learned from Charlie. And then you see what he does after that. Goes to Washington, wins Super Bowls, is the first PR director at the Carolina Panthers. He set a standard. And my memories of Charlie are special because of that.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Jim Saccomano.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Jim's the perfect PR guy. but he's pretty darn close if there is one. A man of integrity, character, ability. I remember the first time I met Sacco, I was advancing a game for Detroit in Denver. And I just remember walking into his office, and it was impeccable. The organization, the structure, and it just exuded professionalism.
Wow.
And then meeting with him, and again, when you're back, you're an NFC team, you don't play the AFC that often, every so many years. So I really hadn't known Sacco at that time. And then we had, that meeting and introduction and the impact he had on me, almost more as a human being than a PR director, because class personified integrity. And then we had the good fortune of working the Super Bowls together. So many Super Bowls with Sacco and Gary Wright, and seeing how he worked, how he dealt with people, and then going through what he went through with the Broncos, all the changes, coming close so many times. I had the good fortune early in my career with Washington to win a Super Bowl, to be on a staff that won a Super Bowl. But the overriding memory I took from that was how devastating it would be to lose a Super Bowl.
Right.
And Sacco had those frustrations early in his career. So I remember after the Broncos finally won the Super Bowl, and Pat Bolin's on the stage, and he's about to present the trophy to their quarterback and say, "This one's for John." And I'm getting chills again because I wanted him to say, "This one's for Jim. This one's for Sacco," because no one was more deserving than Sacco to experience that. Just the best. And he, again, you talk about the word perfect is probably unattainable in life, let alone profession. But Sacco is as good as there is. And I saved Gary Wright for last for a reason. I don't want to say I saved the best for last, but I won't argue that. Gary and I have a unique relationship, primarily, carved through working Super Bowls together. But to me, he's the standard. As a person, as a professional. And I remember my first meeting with Gary. It was a preseason game. I think it was my first year as PR director in Detroit. And I did not advance the game, so I hadn't really spent much time with him. And then the starting lineups back then, the PR staffs coordinated the timing and everything. But we're getting ready for the introductions, and the Lions were late. There was something that happened. I don't know if the coach kept them in the locker room longer than he should have, whatever. We went over all the pregame timing prior to that, and I get a call from Gary, and it was stern. It was, "Get this handled." And I thought, okay. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned that to Gary or not, but I thought, okay, that's how you do it. You get the job done. You do what you have to do. And then a few years later, I was selected to work the Super Bowl and worked with Gary, alongside Gary, for a period in the late 80s and 90s where we coordinated the Super Bowl media efforts. So Gary and I spent a ton of time together. And not only did I see how he handled a staff at the largest sporting event in the world, because Gary ran everything. I was his assistant, and the professionalism with which he handled it. We went through Desert Storm, that war, in the Super Bowl in Tampa, Super Bowl 25, and that was unlike anything that the league had dealt with. And you went from, the Flintstones to the Jetsons overnight in the magnitude of the difference. Okay. Yeah. And just to see Gary in situations that, others would have identified as being tense, stressful, how he handled it, how he managed people, and the respect he had from network, players, coaches, everybody. If anybody ever said you have some Gary Wright in you, it would be the highest honor, because I think he's the standard. So, And again, I could say that about all 5 of these individuals.
Right.
Because they're all a standard. I know Mount Rushmore has 4 faces on it, but the PR one should have at least these 5 and maybe more.
Well, this is the inaugural class. So this is the Mount Rushmore for this year of 2022.
Yeah.
2022, man. Great stories, Bill. And just overall, before I let you go, what did it mean to you to be part of this the selection committee? Because I don't envy you guys. I don't envy you guys at all.
It was, first and foremost, I'm trying to think of another honor in my career that matches this, and I can't because I knew our committee knew the significance of this. Okay, we understood what this represented, our profession, the history of our profession, and I also thought about those members of the NFL selection committee for the players and coaches. And the honor, talking to the Peter Kings of the world over the years, Sal Palantonio when Sal got selected, so many of them, Rick Goslin and all of the greats over the years, and just the honor and the responsibility that they exuded and how important it was to them. And I felt the same, and it wasn't easy, but it was a great problem. Because we knew no matter what, we weren't going to be wrong. Again, we wish we could have put many more in the first year, but we spent a lot of time, and the beauty of it, we included all of the current colleagues, PR colleagues throughout the league, which was important. We looked back as far as we could. We tried to do the best we could, and I know we did the best we could. And it's great that there'll be additional classes to join the Mount Rushmore of PR down the road. But like I said, years from now, to have families and grandchildren and relatives and friends, generations from now, go to Canton and see Gary Wright's name on the wall, Joe Gordon's name on the wall, Jim Saccomano's name on the wall, Charlie Dayton's name on the wall, Joe Browne's name on the wall. It gives me chills today, and it'll give everyone chills for years to come. And that's the beauty of it. And that's why it's the ultimate honor for our PR colleagues.
So, Bill, is it safe to say that you will be here at the end of the month to celebrate the excellence of everybody here at the
Absolutely. And I'll do it with pride that I don't know that I've ever had. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to, again, was when Gary was selected by Steve Largent to present him, because that was the first PR professional ever honored with a selection to present somebody for the Hall of Fame. So in many respects, this will be similar. This will be similar. Well, because Bill, a part of each of us is going in with those guys, and they'll carry the flag, in the most profoundly proud and appropriate way, with character, integrity, professionalism, and that servant attitude that to me is at the core of our profession.
Well, Bill, we want to thank you so much for sharing the rich history and just telling us how this, teaching us today. We learned so much of how this inaugural class of public relations directors came to be for the Award of Excellence. We can't wait to celebrate you and your colleagues here at the end of this month. Thank you so much for joining us right here on The Mission.
Thank you so much, Jameer. Have a wonderful day, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bill Keenist.